The night was cold. A little girl stood barefoot on the doorstep, clutching a torn teddy bear. Her mother's voice still echoed. "Get out!" The suitcase burst open, clothes scattered in the dirt, her face blurred with tears. Neighbors watched, but no one moved. She knelt, begging, her small hands trembling. Just when despair swallowed her, a shadow fell across the street. A tall figure stepped forward, his voice firm yet gentle. "From now on, you come with me." But why? Why would a child be thrown out like this? And could this moment truly change her life forever? The rain had been falling all afternoon, a steady rhythm against the cracked windows of the small apartment in Detroit's East Side. At 12 years old, Elena Marquez sat curled up on the worn couch, her knees hugged tightly to her chest. The place smelled of stale beer and cigarette smoke, a constant reminder of her stepmother Carla, who spent most nights at the bar across the street, and most mornings yelling at Elena for things she never did. Elena wasn't supposed to exist in Carla's world. She was the child of Miguel Marquez, a man who had once been known for his quiet dignity, a factory worker who came home every night with aching hands, but a gentle smile. He had married Carla only a year after Elena's mother died in a car accident. At first it seemed like Carla would fill the hole left behind. But Elena quickly learned that Carla's affection was conditional. It only came when her father was around. Now, her father was gone. A construction accident had taken his life 6 months earlier, leaving Elena stranded in Carla's care. Except care was a word too generous for what really happened. That night the argument had been about something trivial, a broken plate. Carla had accused Elena of deliberately breaking it to spite her, even though it had slipped from Carla's own hand after one too many drinks. "You useless brat," Carla shouted, her voice shrill, as she hurled the remaining shards into the trash. "Do you know how much that cost? You're nothing but a burden. If Miguel were here, he'd see you for what you are." Elena flinched at the words, but said nothing. She had learned silence was the safest response. Speaking back only fueled Carla's rage. But silence wasn't enough. Carla grabbed Elena's arm, dragging her toward the door. "Get out. Go live in the streets if you think you're too good for this house." Elena's small suitcase, still packed with the few belongings she'd kept from her father's things, was shoved into her hands. The door slammed behind her, leaving her in the cold rain, her thin jacket clinging to her skin. She stood on the apartment steps, staring at the flickering streetlight. For the first time since her father's death, she felt completely and utterly alone. The first night on the streets was the longest night of Elena's life. She wandered aimlessly, clutching the suitcase, until she found herself in front of an abandoned laundromat. The broken windows were patched with cardboard, but the doorway offered enough shelter from the rain. She curled up there, shivering, her stomach aching with hunger. At some point, exhaustion won. Her dreams were jagged flashes of her father's smile, followed by Carla's sneer. She woke to the sound of footsteps. "Hey, kid," a voice said. It was a boy, maybe 15 or 16, with a hood pulled tight over his head. His name, she would later learn, was Jaden. He lived with a group of runaways in the neighborhood, surviving by stealing food and sneaking into abandoned buildings. "You can't stay here," Jaden said, his tone both warning and sympathetic. "Cops come around sometimes. If they find you, they'll throw you in some foster dump. Better come with me." Too tired to argue, Elena followed him. He led her to a burned-out house at the end of a quiet street. Inside, 4 other kids huddled around a candle for warmth. Their faces were sharp with hunger, their eyes wary. "This is Elena," Jaden introduced. "She's one of us now." For the first time in days, Elena felt a flicker of relief. But she didn't yet know that joining this group meant stepping into a world of dangers far worse than Carla's cruelty. Because in the shadows of Detroit's forgotten streets, survival had a price. And soon, Elena would discover that betrayal could come even from those who offered shelter. The burned-out house where Jaden took Elena quickly became her new reality. The floorboards creaked with every step, and graffiti covered the walls messages from kids who had passed through before, some still alive, some forgotten. A single blanket was passed around at night, and Elena often ended up shivering on the bare floor. At first, the group seemed almost like a family. Jaden was the leader, though he couldn't have been more than 16. There was Kira, a tough-talking girl with cropped hair who had run away from foster care. Malik, 13, was quiet and sharp-eyed, good at picking locks. And then there was Drew, the oldest at 17, whose constant smirk concealed a streak of cruelty Elena hadn't noticed right away. Food was the group's biggest struggle. Every morning they scattered into the streets to scavenge. Jaden taught Elena how to slip into grocery stores unnoticed to grab just enough to avoid detection. It terrified her, but hunger left no choice. The first time she stole a bruised apple shoved under her shirt, her heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone could hear. When they regrouped at night, the food was divided. Sometimes Elena got a fair share, but other times Drew forgot to pass her anything or mocked her for being too slow, too scared. Dead weight, he sneered one night, tossing her a crust of bread so hard it hit her chest. If you can't pull your load, maybe you don't belong here. Jaden would usually step in telling Drew to back off, but even he couldn't always shield her. Survival left no room for softness. Weeks blurred together. Elena's jacket grew thinner, her shoes wore holes, and her hunger became a constant ache. She still carried her suitcase everywhere, though it was more a burden than a comfort. Inside were her father's old watch, a faded photograph of him holding her as a baby, and the tiny stuffed rabbit her mother had given her before the accident. These were the only pieces of her life before Carla, and she clung to them desperately. But even that was stolen from her. One night, when the group returned from scavenging, Elena noticed her suitcase was gone. She panicked, searching the corners of the ruined house, but it had vanished. Looking for this, Drew's voice cut through the shadows. He dangled the suitcase in one hand, a grin spreading across his face. "Give it back." Elena's voice cracked with desperation. Why Drew taunted? "What's in here, huh? Nothing but junk. You think memories are gonna feed you?" He dropped the suitcase onto the floor and kicked it open. The watch clattered out the photo, bent the rabbit tumbling into the dirt. Elena lunged to gather them, but Drew's foot pressed down hard on the rabbit's head. You're carrying this trash while we starve, pathetic." "Stop it," Elena cried, clutching the photo to her chest. "That's all I have left," Jaden intervened, shoving Drew back. "That's enough," he snapped. But Drew just laughed and stormed out, leaving Elena trembling, her treasures dirtied but intact. That night, Elena cried silently into the stuffed rabbit's worn fur. It wasn't just the loss of safety or food anymore. It was the constant reminder that she was unwanted even here, among the discarded. The betrayal came a few days later. Jaden had planned a bigger score, sneaking into a delivery truck parked behind a corner store. They needed the food. It was winter now, and cold gnawed at their bones. Elena wanted to help, desperate to prove she wasn't a burden. But when the night came, everything went wrong. As Jaden boosted her into the back of the truck, the doors suddenly slammed shut. Police sirens wailed nearby. Panic surged through Elena as she realized what had happened. Through the narrow gap, she saw Drew standing with a smirk, pointing toward the truck. He had sold them out. By the time the police yanked the doors open, Jaden and the others had vanished, leaving Elena alone. The officers grabbed her, roughly accusing her of theft. She tried to explain, but her voice shook too much to be convincing. The next thing she knew, she was in the back of a squad car, Her suitcase seized her rabbit stuffed roughly into a plastic evidence bag. The juvenile center was worse than the streets. The walls were gray, the windows barred, and the girls she was placed with were hardened, older, and mean. Elena kept to herself, but it didn't protect her from whispered taunts or the occasional shove. Nights were the hardest lying on a thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, replaying her father's voice in her head. "Me Estrella, my little star, don't ever give up." But the voice was fading, replaced by Carla's venom. Drew's laughter, the clang of cell doors. It was here, at her lowest point, that the trajectory of Elena's life began to shift. One morning as she sat in the cafeteria, picking at a tray of cold eggs, a man in a tailored suit appeared in the doorway. He carried himself with authority, his gaze scanning the room until it landed on her. "Elena Marquez," he asked, his voice, steady, unfamiliar. She froze, a fork clattering from her hand. Nobody ever came for her. But this man's arrival would change everything, though, whether it was salvation or another kind of trial Elena couldn't yet know. The cafeteria buzzed with clattering trays and low murmurs, but for Elena, the world seemed to fall silent. The man in the suit stood at the doorway like he didn't belong in this place of chipped paint and fluorescent lights. "Elena Marquez," he repeated, his voice carrying over the noise. The guards looked surprised. No one ever came for girls like her. They escorted him closer, and Elena shrank instinctively, clutching her tray. "I'm Daniel Rivas," he introduced himself, gently pulling up a chair across from her. His dark eyes softened as they met hers. "I work with a nonprofit that helps children in situations like yours." Elena blinked, suspicious. "Like, what situations?" Daniel leaned in, lowering his voice. "Kids who've been abandoned, who never got a chance. Kids who deserve better than this." The words pierced her chest like a blade. No one had ever spoken about her life that way, not as trash to be discarded, not as a criminal, but as someone who deserved better. Still, mistrust weighed heavy. She had been betrayed before by Carla, by Drew, even by a world that never seemed to care. What if this was another trap? "Why me?" she whispered, eyes downcast. Daniel hesitated before answering. "Because I heard your story, and because someone once gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it. Now it's my turn to do the same." For the first time in months, Elena felt a flicker of something dangerously close to hope. Within days, paperwork was filed, and Elena was released into Daniel's custody as part of a community rehabilitation program. Leaving the juvenile center felt surreal, stepping into the sunlight, the cold air sharp in her lungs, clutching the plastic bag with her few belongings. Daniel drove her through the city, pointing out landmarks, but Elena barely listened. Her gaze stayed fixed on the world outside the car window, so open, so alive, yet so unfamiliar. They arrived at a modest brick house on the edge of the city. The lawn was unkempt, the paint chipped, but warmth radiated from inside. "This is home," Daniel said as he carried her bag in. Elena froze at the threshold. The word home had always been slippery like water through her fingers. But here, the air smelled faintly of cinnamon, and in the living room stood a woman with kind eyes and a toddler balanced on her hip. "This is my wife, Marisol, and our son, Mateo," Daniel introduced. Marisol smiled. "Hola, Elena. We're glad you're here." Elena mumbled a quiet, "Hi, too," overwhelmed to say more. The first nights in Daniel's house were strange. She had her own bed, her own blanket, soft and smelling of laundry soap. Yet she lay awake, muscles tense, waiting for the moment it would all be taken away. Daniel and Marisol treated her kindly, but kindness was harder to accept than cruelty. Cruelty she understood. Kindness demanded trust, and trust was dangerous. At dinner, Marisol asked her about school. Elena shrugged. She hadn't been in months, I'm dumb anyway, she muttered, stabbing her fork into the rice. You're not dumb, Daniel said firmly. You just haven't been given a chance to learn. There's a difference. The words lodged in her chest. A chance. Always that word again. Could she really deserve one? But the outside world wasn't ready to forget who she had been. On her first day back at school, whispers followed her down the hallway. That's the girl who got arrested. She's from Juvie. Stay away. Elena kept her head down, cheeks burning. The teacher tried to be supportive, but classmates sneered or moved their desks farther away. At lunch, she sat alone, hands clenched in her lap. When she returned home that afternoon, she slammed her backpack onto the floor. I'm not going back. They all hate me. Daniel knelt beside her. I know it feels like that. But people only see what you used to be. You'll show them who you are now if you keep walking forward. Tears welled in her eyes. What if I can't? Then we'll walk with you, he said simply. But walking forward wasn't easy. The scars of betrayal ran deep. Nights still brought nightmares of Drew slamming the suitcase shut of Carla's hand, striking her cheek. Sometimes Elena lashed out, yelling at Marisol over nothing or retreating into silence for days. One evening, after a particularly bad argument, where Elena shouted that she didn't need anyone, she locked herself in her room. On the dresser sat the stuffed rabbit, cleaned and stitched by Marisol. Elena picked it up, hugging it to her chest, whispering through sobs, "Why can't I just be normal?" She didn't realize Daniel was outside the door, listening quietly, giving her space. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, Elena began to change. She started answering questions in class, even smiling once or twice, when Mateo toddled into her room with toys. She still carried her scars, but the edges were softening. Until one evening, when a knock at the door shattered everything. Daniel opened it to reveal a familiar figure, Jaden thinner, eyes hollow, clutching a backpack. Elena, he rasped, his voice trembling. I need your help. And in that moment, Elena realized the past she had tried to escape wasn't done with her yet. Jaden stood in the doorway, shoulders hunched against the cold, his eyes darting nervously past Daniel, as though expecting someone to drag him back into the street. He looked older somehow, though only a few months had passed since Elena had last seen him. His hair was longer, his clothes ragged, and his face bore the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept in days. Elena, he repeated, voice breaking. Please. I didn't know where else to go. Elena froze in the middle of the living room. 100 memories surged at once, the nights they spent huddled together, whispering dreams of escape, the betrayal that landed her in juvenile detention, the deafening silence after he disappeared. Her stomach twisted. Jaden. What are you doing here? I messed up, he said quickly, his hands trembling. The guys I was staying with, they stole from the wrong people. They're after me now. I thought maybe you could, I don't know, let me stay for a while, just until I figure something out. Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't raise his voice, but his presence was firm. Elena, do you know him? Elena's throat closed up. She wanted to scream, to push Jaden away, to demand why he had abandoned her when she needed him most. But she also saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear she'd once carried alone and unwanted. He's my friend, she finally said, though the word felt strange now. Daniel invited Jaden inside, but didn't let go of caution. He spoke calmly, but with an edge Elena recognized as protective. We'll give you a meal, then we'll talk. At the dinner table, Jaden devoured his food, hardly looking up. Mateo giggled from his high chair, smearing mashed potatoes on his face, but the tension between the older kids was sharp enough to choke on. Marisol, ever gentle, broke the silence. You must be tired. After dinner, you can sleep on the couch tonight. Jayden glanced at Elena, then nodded gratefully. Elena barely touched her plate. Her mind spun in circles. This house had begun to feel like a fragile bridge to a future she'd never thought possible. And now Jayden, the boy who had once been her only anchor, was back threatening to shatter the delicate balance. Later that night, Elena found Jayden sitting in the darkened living room, knees drawn to his chest. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered sharply. He looked up, hurt flashing across his face. "I didn't know where else to go. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to come crawling back after—" He trailed off, shame heavy in his voice. Elena's anger flared. "After you left me to take the fall, after you ran when the cops came and I got locked up, do you know what that was like for me?" Jayden dropped his gaze. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it. But I swear, Elena, I didn't mean to leave you behind. I panicked. I was scared." His voice cracked. "I'm still scared." Elena's chest ached with conflicting emotions, rage, sorrow, longing. For so long, Jayden had been her family. But he had also been the reason her life fell apart. "Why should I trust you now?" she whispered. Jayden's answer was simple, raw. "Because if you don't, I won't survive." The next day, Daniel pulled Elena aside. "Listen," he said gently. "I know you care about him. But this house, your progress, it can't survive if you bring danger into it. You've worked too hard." Elena bristled. "So what, we just throw him back out there to die?" Daniel studied her carefully. "This isn't just about him. It's about you. You're at a crossroads, Elena. You can choose the life you're building here, or you can get pulled back into the life you fought to escape." The words cut deep. For days, Elena walked around in a fog, torn between gratitude for the family who had taken her in and the unshakable loyalty she felt for the boy who had once been her world. But the world made the choice harder. Rumors spread at school that she was harboring a criminal. Someone had seen Jayden leaving Daniel's house. Whispers grew into insults, then threats. Teachers who had begun to show her patience now regarded her with suspicion again. One afternoon, as she walked home, 2 older boys from school blocked her path. "Heard your boyfriend's hiding out at that do-gooder's place," one sneered. "Better watch yourself. He's bad news." Elena shoved past them, but their words lingered like poison. When she arrived home, she found Jayden arguing with Daniel. "I can't stay locked up here like some prisoner," Jayden shouted. "I need to move to find work to fix this mess. And running around will only make things worse," Daniel replied firmly. Elena slammed the door behind her. "Stop it, both of you." Her voice cracked with desperation. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to me?" She glared at Jayden. "You left me once. Now you're dragging me down again. And I don't know if I can survive losing everything twice." Silence fell. Jayden's face crumpled, but he said nothing. That night, Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind torn in two. On one side was Daniel's steady hand, the promise of safety, the fragile warmth of family. On the other was Jayden, broken, flawed, but the only person who had ever truly known her before all this. Her heart pounded with the weight of the decision she knew she couldn't avoid, much longer choose the family who saved her, or save the boy who once was her family. And for the first time since leaving juvenile detention, Elena realized something terrifying. No matter which choice she made, she was going to lose. The house felt colder in the days that followed, though the autumn sun still poured through the windows. Every word between Elena and Jayden seemed edged with unspoken pain, every glance with Daniel laced with caution. Even Marisol noticed her gentle eyes flickering between them with quiet concern. Elena tried to focus on school, on Mateo's laughter, on the warmth of family dinners. But the whispers in the hallway grew louder. "She's covering for him. She's no different than before. Trash stays trash." One afternoon, after a particularly brutal day of insults and a teacher's disappointed sigh, Elena found Jaden waiting outside the school gates. His hood was pulled low, his expression restless. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed, pulling him toward the side street. "I needed to see you," Jaden said, his voice urgent. "The guys who are after me, they're closing in. I need cash, Elena. Just enough to get out of the city, start fresh somewhere. I swear I'll pay it back." Elena's heart pounded. "Where am I supposed to get money? You know I don't have anything." Jaden's eyes flicked toward her backpack. "Daniel keeps cash in that drawer by the desk, doesn't he? I saw it." The words hit her like a slap. "You want me to steal from them? From the only people who've given me a chance?" Jaden stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. Please, Elena. I'm begging you." That night, Elena sat on her bed, the drawer Jaden mentioned haunting her thoughts. She could almost feel the crumpled bills between her fingers, hear the creak of the floorboards as she snuck across the hall. Her stomach churned. She thought about Daniel's trust, the way he had defended her at school meetings, the way he never judged her mistakes. She thought about Marisol, who hugged her without hesitation. She thought about Mateo's tiny arms wrapped around her neck. And then she thought about Jaden, cold and desperate, hunted by shadows he couldn't escape. Tears blurred her vision. No matter what she chose, someone would bleed. The decision was ripped from her when 2 nights later Daniel woke to a noise downstairs. He found Jaden crouched by the desk, the drawer half open. "What do you think you're doing?" Daniel's voice was calm, but it carried a storm. Jaden froze. Elena, hearing the commotion, rushed into the room. Her heart dropped at the sight Jaden caught red-handed, Daniel's disappointment sharp as a blade. "Daniel, wait," she pleaded. But Jaden snapped. "Don't look at me like that. You think you're better than me sitting here in your perfect little house? You don't know what it's like out there." Daniel's voice hardened. "I know enough to see you're dragging Elena back into the same darkness she's been trying to escape." Elena stepped between them, tears streaming down her face. "Stop it. Just stop." She turned on Jaden. "Do you even care what this is doing to me? You're supposed to be my friend, my family. But all you do is take and take until there's nothing left." Jaden's face twisted with anger and shame. "I thought you of all people would understand." Then he stormed past them, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was unbearable. Daniel sank into a chair, his hands rubbing his temples. "Elena," he said softly, "I know this hurts, but you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, and if you keep trying, you'll lose yourself too." His words broke something inside her. She ran upstairs, locked the door, and collapsed onto her bed, sobbing into her pillow. The betrayal burned deeper than she thought possible, not just Jaden's, but her own, because a part of her still wanted to run after him. The next few days were a blur. At school, the rumors reached a boiling point. A group of students cornered her in the hallway. "Heard your little boyfriend's a thief," one sneered. "Guess it runs in the family." When she pushed past them, one shoved her hard against the lockers. The crack of impact echoed, followed by laughter. Elena slid to the floor, her vision swimming. By the time she stumbled home, her body bruised and her spirit shattered. She no longer knew who she was. A girl caught between 2 worlds belonging to neither. That night she stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The girl staring back was hollow-eyed, broken. "I can't do this," she whispered. And for the first time since arriving at Daniel and Marisol's house, Elena wondered if she truly deserved the love they offered, or if she was destined to destroy it, just like everything else in her life. Elena stopped eating dinner with the family. She would retreat to her room before Marisol called them to the table, claiming she wasn't hungry. She skipped school twice in the same week, wandering through the city streets, instead letting the chaos of car horns and the blur of strangers drown out her thoughts. Daniel noticed, of course. His quiet attempts to reach her knocks on her door, gentle reminders, were met with silence. Even Mateo sensed something was wrong. He left little drawings outside her room, pictures of stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. But Elena couldn't bring herself to open the door. Inside, she felt hollow. Jaden hadn't come back since that night. No calls, no notes, not even a rumor on the streets. She told herself she didn't care, but the truth pressed down on her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. Was he alive? Was he gone forever, and worse, was it her fault? One evening, while the house lay in quiet darkness, Elena slipped out. The autumn air was sharp against her skin as she walked aimlessly, her hoodie pulled tight around her. She found herself drifting toward the edge of the old neighborhood, the one she had sworn she'd never return to. The streets were the same cracked sidewalks, flickering streetlights, shadows that swallowed every corner. And in those shadows, familiar faces emerged. "Elena," a voice drawled. 3 figures stepped forward. Boys she recognized from her past, boys who had once run with Jaden. Their smirks gleamed under the streetlight. "Didn't think we'd see you back here." Her chest tightened. "I'm just passing through." Passing through. One of them, taller and leaner than the rest, stepped closer. "Heard you've been living nice. New house, new family. Must be easy forgetting where you came from." Elena's fists clenched. "I didn't forget." "Oh, really?" His tone turned mocking. "Then why aren't you out here with us anymore? Or with Jaden? Guess you left him behind too." The words sliced deeper than they should have. She bit down hard, but the tears threatened anyway. Before she could answer, one of the boys sneered. "You think you're better now, don't you? All cleaned up little foster princess?" He shoved her shoulder. "But trash don't turn into gold." The world tilted as Elena stumbled back. Old instincts screamed at her to fight, to lash out, but another voice whispered, "No, not again. Not this time." She broke into a run, their laughter chasing her down the street. By the time she reached the house, she was shaking. She slipped through the back door, thinking she'd made it unseen, only to find Marisol waiting in the kitchen robe, wrapped around her, a mug of tea in her hands. Elena. The name was soft, not accusatory, but Elena flinched as if struck. I just needed some air," she stammered. Marisol's eyes searched her face, seeing far more than Elena wanted her to. "You're carrying too much alone." Elena's breath hitched. For a moment she wanted to collapse into Marisol's arms, to let go of the ache she'd been burying. But the shame was stronger. "You don't understand. I mess everything up. I ruin everything I touch." Marisol set her mug down and stepped closer. "That's not true." "Yes, it is." Elena's voice cracked. "Look at Jaden, he's gone because of me. The kids at school hate me. Even Daniel, he trusted me, and I almost betrayed him. I don't belong here. I don't belong anywhere." The words tumbled out in a flood, raw and jagged. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. Marisol's eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "You are not your past, Elena, and you are not responsible for the choices other people make. Jaden's path is his own. Those kids at school, they don't see the real you. But we do. Daniel and I, we chose you, not because we thought you'd be perfect, but because we believed you deserved to be loved." Something in Elena cracked wide open. She fell into Marisol's arms, sobbing harder than she had in years. The next morning, Daniel knocked gently on her door. This time, Elena opened it. He didn't lecture or scold. He simply sat with her on the edge of the bed. "I know how it feels to think you don't belong," he said quietly. When I was your age, I was tossed around from place to place too. I thought I'd never be more than a burden." He paused, looking at her. "But someone believed in me. And that belief, it saved my life." Elena's chest tightened. She had never imagined Daniel carrying such scars. "I see that same fight in you," he continued. "You've been through more than anyone should. But you're still here, still standing. That means something, Elena. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." That day, for the first time in weeks, Elena returned to school. She walked through the halls head high despite the whispers. When the same group of students sneered at her, she didn't shrink away. She didn't fight either. She simply kept walking. Inside, something had shifted. She wasn't healed, not yet, but she wasn't broken beyond repair either. For the first time, Elena dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could write a different story for herself. For a while, things seemed to get better. Elena started showing up to school consistently again. She even completed a few assignments, though her grades were still shaky. Marisol and Daniel noticed the small steps and celebrated them quietly, praising her not for perfection, but for effort. Even Mateo's drawings grew brighter little suns with smiling faces that he proudly taped to her bedroom door. But healing was never a straight line. One Thursday afternoon, Elena overheard two classmates laughing near their lockers. "Did you hear her brother's back in juvie? Guess it runs in the family." "Yeah, I don't know why the Rodriguezes waste their time. She'll end up the same." The words cut deep sharper than they should have. Elena clenched her jaw and walked past without responding. She had promised herself she wouldn't fight. But their laughter echoed inside her, stirring that old storm of rage and shame. That evening she found out the rumor was true. Jaden had been picked up for robbery. No one knew when he would get out. The news hit her harder than she expected. She locked herself in her room, staring at the ceiling as her chest tightened. No matter what Marisol or Daniel said, she couldn't escape the weight of her bloodline. Was she destined to fail too? The next week, her English teacher handed back an essay. For the first time, Elena had tried. Really tried. She stayed up until midnight, writing it, pouring pieces of herself into the words. A bold red C scrawled across the top. The teacher's only comment, unorganized, needs more structure. Elena swallowed the lump in her throat. She had wanted to prove she was capable, but once again her effort wasn't enough. That Friday night, Daniel found her sitting on the porch steps, hoodie pulled over her head. "You're quiet," he said, easing down beside her. She shrugged. "Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. School, a family, any of it." Daniel exhaled slowly. "You think you're failing. But what I see a girl who keeps standing up no matter how many times life knocks her down. That's strength, Elena. More than grades. More than fitting in." His words comforted her, but they didn't erase the ache. A few days later, the ache grew into something sharper. A notice came from the court. Elena's biological mother, absent for years, wanted visitation rights. The name alone stirred a hurricane of emotions. Her mother, who had left her and Jaden to fend for themselves. Her mother, who had chosen addiction over raising her kids. Now, after all these years, she wanted back, and Elena felt sick. Fear, anger, and longing tangled into knots she couldn't untie. What if the judge agreed? What if she had to leave the Rodriguezes, the only people who had ever shown her what family meant? That night she overheard Daniel and Marisol talking in hushed voices. "She's not stable," Marisol whispered. "It could undo everything." Daniel's reply was firm. "We'll fight for her. Elena belongs here." Elena stood frozen in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. No one had ever said words like that about her before. She belongs here. Yet even with their promise, doubt gnawed at her. What if love wasn't enough to keep her safe? What if the law didn't care about what she felt? She lay awake for hours, staring at the shadows on her ceiling. For the first time, she realized this wasn't just about surviving day to day. This was about her future, her identity, her right to choose where she truly belonged. And it terrified her. The weeks after the courtroom verdict felt like a strange dream for Elena. For the first time in years, she woke each morning without the knot of dread in her stomach. No slammed doors, no empty cupboards, no waiting for footsteps that might never come. Instead, there was the smell of Marisol's cinnamon oatmeal, Daniel's steady presence with the newspaper, and Mateo's cheerful chatter about soccer practice. Yet beneath the relief, a quiet storm still brewed inside her. At night, when the house was silent, Elena often lay awake, replaying the image of her mother sobbing in the courtroom. The sound of it clung to her, tugging at her chest like invisible strings. She had chosen to stay, chosen safety and love, but she couldn't erase the ache of being the daughter of someone who had walked away. One evening, she sat alone on the back porch, clutching Jaden's old sketchbook. The pages were filled with his rough sketches of cityscapes, superheroes, and sometimes their little family, always with a missing piece. Tears blurred her eyes. If Jaden were here, would he be proud of me? Or would he say I betrayed her too? The screen door creaked open. Daniel stepped out, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. He placed one beside her and sat down without a word. They watched the night sky for a while, silence settling like a blanket. Finally, Elena whispered, "I feel guilty, like I abandoned her." Daniel's voice was low, steady. "You didn't abandon anyone, Elena. You protected yourself. That's not betrayal, it's survival. And survival is nothing to be ashamed of." She looked at him, his profile lit by the porch light. His eyes carried the same steadiness he had shown in court, the same belief in her when her voice trembled. Something inside her loosened. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe love wasn't something that had to hurt. School, however, was another battlefield. Some classmates whispered that she was the foster kid who chose strangers over her mom. Others avoided her altogether, as though her pain might be contagious. One afternoon, a girl from her math class muttered under her breath, "I'd never ditch my mom for some random family." The words hit Elena like stones. She went to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and pressed her fists to her eyes. The echo of those cruel whispers stirred the old shame she thought she had buried. But then she remembered the courtroom, the way she had stood, voice trembling but firm, claiming her right to safety. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked back to class. That small act, invisible to everyone else, felt like climbing a mountain. By winter, things began to shift. Elena joined the school's art club, using Jaden's sketchbook as inspiration. She poured her pain into charcoal lines and watercolor swirls, creating pieces that spoke louder than any words she could find. One painting of a cracked vase mended with gold caught her teacher's eye. "You're turning your broken pieces into something beautiful," the teacher said. Elena tucked those words close to her heart. At home, Mateo insisted she help him build a snow fort, even when her fingers turned numb. Marisol taught her how to make tamales laughing when Elena accidentally dropped too much filling. Slowly, the emptiness that had once consumed her began to fill, not with perfection, not with erasure of the past, but with moments of connection stitched together like a quilt. One Sunday, while walking home from church with the Rodriguezes, Elena spotted her mother across the street. She was thinner, her movements jittery, her eyes shadowed. Their gazes locked for a brief moment. A surge of longing and anger clashed inside Elena, wanting to run to her, to be small again, but also wanting to turn away and protect the fragile peace she had found. Her mother lifted a trembling hand as if to wave, but then dropped it. She turned and walked away. Elena froze in place, breath shallow. Daniel gently touched her shoulder. You don't have to decide how to feel about her today. One step at a time. Elena knotted her throat tight. Watching her mother's figure disappear into the crowd, she realized something some wounds never fully heal. But they don't have to define who she becomes. That night, as she lay in bed, she whispered into the darkness, "I'm still here." The words were not a plea, but a declaration. She was still here, scarred but alive, loved, and beginning to believe in tomorrow. And for the first time in her 14 years, Elena felt not like a burden or an afterthought, but like the author of her own story. Final reflection page. Stories like Elena's are not easy to read, let alone to live. They force us to sit with discomfort, to witness the raw edges of love and betrayal, to confront the reality that not every family is safe, and not every parent knows how to protect. Yet in that tension between abandonment and resilience, between loss and rediscovery, we find lessons that stretch beyond fiction and into the core of human experience. The weight of silence. One of the strongest threads in Elena's story is silence. For years, she carried the quiet burden of her mother's absence, waiting, hoping, fearing. Silence is powerful. It can be protective, but it can also trap us. Elena's silence was born from fear of breaking the fragile bond she still clung to. But when she finally found her voice in court, trembling but unshakable, her silence transformed into strength. How many of us live under a similar shadow? Perhaps not in a courtroom, but in our workplace's relationships, or even within ourselves, choosing silence to avoid conflict, to protect someone else, or to hold on to a love that hurts more than it heals. Elena teaches us that speaking out, though terrifying, is often the first act of freedom. The fragility of family, we are taught, is sacred. Yet Elena's life reminds us that family is not always defined by blood. Her biological mother loved her in fractured, inconsistent ways, ways that could not protect her from hunger, loneliness, or fear. By contrast, Daniel Marisol and Matteo strangers at first chose to love her steadily. They filled her days with food, laughter, and a sense of belonging she had never known. It challenges us to rethink what family means. Sometimes family is chosen. Sometimes it is built through trust care and shared struggle rather than birthright. This is not a betrayal of our roots. It is an expansion of them, the shadow of guilt. Even after finding safety, Elena was haunted by guilt. She wondered if choosing love elsewhere meant betraying the woman who gave her life. This guilt is deeply human. Children, even when neglected, often carry a loyalty that defies logic. It is not unique to Elena. It echoes in countless stories of those who grow up in fractured homes. The lesson here is compassion for ourselves. Survival is not betrayal. Seeking love, stability, or safety does not make us ungrateful or disloyal. It makes us human. And healing requires allowing ourselves to lay down guilt and carry instead the lighter weight of self-acceptance. The power of witness. One of the most moving aspects of Elena's journey was the role of witnesses, those who stood beside her when she could not stand alone. Daniel's calm encouragement, Marisol's warm embrace, Matteo's playful companionship, even her teacher's recognition of her art, all became pillars that held her steady. This shows us the immense power of simply being there. We do not need to have perfect words or heroic solutions. Sometimes what saves a life is the presence of someone willing to listen, to show up, to believe. Real-life resonance. Though Elena's story is fictional, it mirrors realities faced by many. Around the world, children experience neglect, abandonment, or unstable homes. Some find refuge with relatives, foster families, or community programs. Others are not so fortunate. The emotional scars they carry, feelings of unworthiness, guilt, fear of love, are profound. But Elena's journey also shows resilience. Children are not simply fragile victims, they are also fierce survivors. With even a small measure of consistent love, they can rebuild. With opportunities to express themselves through art, writing, music, or safe conversation, they can transform pain into beauty. This has implications for us all. Whether we are parents, teachers, friends, or strangers, we carry the potential to be part of someone's survival story. A kind word, a patient ear, an open door. These gestures may seem small, but to someone like Elena, they can be life-changing. Practical takeaways. So, what can we take from Elena's journey into our daily lives? Redefine family. Don't cling to harmful relationships just because of blood ties. Surround yourself with people who choose you, respect you, and nurture your growth. Honor your voice. Speak your truth even if it shakes. Silence may protect for a time, but it cannot heal. Practice presence. Be a witness in someone else's life. You don't need to fix everything. Just showing up consistently can be an anchor for someone in chaos. Release guilt. Choosing safety or love is never betrayal. Your well-being matters. Find outlets for healing. Like Elena's, art channeling pain into creation can be profoundly restorative. Journaling, painting, music, or movement can all become languages for what words cannot carry. Closing thoughts. Elena's whispered words at the end, "I'm still here," capture the heart of her story. Survival itself is an act of courage. But more than survival, she found a path toward belonging, toward redefining love on her own terms. For all of us, the lesson is clear: life will hand us betrayals, absences, and heartbreaks that seem unbearable. But if we dare to seek out the people who choose us, if we dare to speak our truths and embrace the possibility of love that doesn't hurt, we too can whisper with resilience and pride, "I'm still here." And perhaps in saying it, we remind others that they can be too.